We have been in outright goods deflation pretty much since the beginning of this year. So when you look at the consumer price index, the most common reading on inflation, it's bucketed into two different categories, goods and services. So what I'm showing on the screen right now, in white, you see the goods component of core CPI, and in blue, you see the services component of CPI. For those of you that are just listening on Spotify or whatever platform you use, you can see the visuals if you hop onto our YouTube channel. So anyways, what I'm showing is just that services continue to be the reason that inflation is up, essentially. And so goods being in negative territory, specifically having fallen 1.7% over the past year, you've had a lot of moderation there. And keep in mind, these figures are excluding food and energy. So it's things like apparel, right? Or shopping. Like all of these things, clearly people are spending less money on because either they don't have an ability or willingness, but that's going to cause these producers to pull prices back.
And I think we had a pull forward in demand, as people couldn't travel, right? This was a well-documented phenomenon. You couldn't travel. People still wanted to spend. They would go to Home Depot. They would go to Best Buy. They were spending on goods. How often can you buy a TV? How often you're going to renovate a bathroom? So the demand, I think rightly so, has waned.
Yeah. And, kind of speaking of the pandemic, one of the hottest categories from an inflation perspective in and directly after the pandemic was used cars. Used cars were at astronomical levels from a price increase perspective. And what you see now, again, same type of chart showing year over year price increases. The white line is still the goods component, of course, CPI. The blue line is now used cars and trucks, price increases year over year. So if you look way back in 2021, you had used cars, the prices had increased, 45+%. Obviously not sustainable, but you've gotten back to a level now where really used car prices have been decreasing since the end of 2022 to the point where now they rest at, more than -9% year over year. I don't think that this is an area where you're going to see a ton more disinflation, just given how much we've already seen. But the fact that used cars actually did tick up a little bit in May, if you looked at the month over month numbers, which I'm not showing on the screen right now, that kind of implies to me that we might have found a bottom there. And if you are going to get continued suppression of these inflation readings, we've said it before, it needs to come from the services side realistically. So when you look at some of the components on the services side, first thing I'll call out is car insurance. So even though you might have used car prices that have, call it, bottomed out, I still think they're an important category to watch because of some of the downstream effects that they can have, especially on things like repairs and especially like insurance. I think one of the surprises we got in last week's report was finally getting a bit of a downtick in car insurance premiums. And this comes after a pretty ridiculous run of monthly, insurance premiums are up 20% year over year for cars and trucks. That's pretty crazy. And I feel like that's not something that gets called out when people talk about inflation. When people think about inflation, it's just, going to the grocery store or buying a new TV, right? The tangible goods. I don't think a lot of people recognize something like car insurance, that even though it's only, I think, 4% or so of the consumer price index, that's a price that people feel on a monthly basis. And to have it up 20% year over year, that's pretty astonishing. So I talked about falling car prices. I think that should be a leading indicator, if you will, of insurance costs coming down. TBD, but there's been some funkiness in terms of other states having weird regulatory changes and all that. But either way, seeing a little bit of relief there, I think is welcomed and an encouraging sign.